Last year I made 3, maybe even 4 videos on my experience with 2 different biostimulators, Sculptra as well as Lanluma. Under those videos I still get so many questions and comments, and so many of you wanted me to give you an update on my experience with these biostimulators. So that is what today's video is going to be about. I'm going to try to answer your questions and give you an update on my experience with Sculptra as well as Lanluma. Now, really briefly, if you missed my previous videos, I will of course link those down below. And in those videos, I talk in depth about what biostimulators are. But in a nutshell, biostimulators such as Sculptra and Lanluma are made out of polyl lactic acid, or PLLA, which is actually the same material dissolvable stitches are made of. And PLLA, when injected into the skin, stimulates the body's natural collagen production process, resulting in gradual volume restoration. So unlike traditional fillers, which fill instantly, biostimulators, again, stimulate the body's natural collagen production process. To produce collagen takes time. It takes weeks to even months. So to see results from biostimulators takes weeks to even months. There is some initial volume gain right after treatment because biostimulators come in powder form, and this powder gets diluted with a liquid. This mix then gets injected, usually with a cannula, deep into the skin down to the bone. So because liquid is being injected, there is some initial volume gain. However, the body metabolizes this liquid rather quickly, usually within about 5 days or so. So 1 week post-treatment, one usually looks exactly the same as pre-treatment, and then again, it just takes time for the body to produce collagen. Now, before I tell you the reasons why I wanted to try biostimulators, I want to say really briefly, if you have been here for a little while, you know that I am a big believer in learning to love and accept ourselves, flaws and all. But of course, we all want to be attractive and look our best. So about 2 years ago, 2 things happened. First of all, we lived in an apartment in Paris, which ended up having toxic mold. We didn't know at the time of living in the apartment that it had toxic mold. But both our dog Sam and myself ended up getting really sick. And on top of having all kinds of strange symptoms, I ended up losing a bunch of weight. I didn't realize at first that I was losing a bunch of weight because I was eating the same amount of food, I was exercising the same. I didn't realize how much weight I actually had lost until looking back onto pictures and videos of myself from back then. Also, around the same time, maybe a bit earlier, I had, I believe, 3 radiofrequency microneedling sessions. And in hindsight, my provider went way too deep. She went 3 millimeters deep. So she basically went into the subcutaneous tissue and probably ended up melting some of my facial fat. So the combination of losing a bunch of weight, being sick on top of it, and having the way too deep radiofrequency microneedling sessions left me looking quite gaunt. And back then I got so many mean comments under my videos. I was told I look like I'm 100 years old, I should eat, I look like I'm dead, I should stop with the cheek filler because my cheekbones were sticking out so much because I was so sunken in. Now, it wasn't the mean comments that made me want to try biostimulators. It was looking in the mirror and realizing, yes, I really wasn't looking too healthy. So I went to see a provider in Paris I had seen before for IPL treatments, Dr. Guzman, and Dr. Guzman suggested we try biostimulators. Now, back then, Dr. Guzman suggested we try Sculptra, and I actually took you with me for my very first Sculptra experience. Again, I will link that video down below. Now, really briefly, because again, I talked in depth about my experience with biostimulators in the videos linked below. But when I first started, Dr. Guzman thought I would need between 3 or 4 vials of Sculptra. She was very conservative. She injected 1 vial at a time, and then we waited for 6 to 8 weeks to reassess. So for the next year and a half, I saw Dr. Guzman every 6 to 8 weeks. And as you can see in the before and after pictures, after 7 or 8 vials of sculptra, I honestly lost count. Not much had happened. So I was ready to give up, thinking my body is just not responding to biostimulators. But Dr. Guzman ended up talking to a colleague of hers who used to be a sculptra expert, but who had jumped ship to a different biostimulator called Lanluma. Lanluma at the time had been around in Europe and Asia for quite a while, but it was mostly used for the body, mainly for the buttocks. Now, just to not cause any confusion, there are 2 different Lanluma products. One is used for the body and one is used for the face. And the one for the face is called Lanluma V, which is the one Dr. Guzman suggested to try on me. Now, under the video I talk about this, quite a few of you were quite upset with Dr. Guzman, saying that it wasn't fair for her to keep stringing me along and to keep injecting sculptra when it wasn't working, and when she knew that something else was out there that might be working. It was completely my fault. I was the one that kept going back saying, another vial, another vial. And it wasn't until Dr. Guzman ended up talking to this colleague of hers that she learned something else was out there that may work better. So let's answer the questions I get from you so frequently. One of the questions is, how many vials of Lanluma did I get injected? I ended up getting 2 vials of Lanluma. Now, again, I had between 7 and 8 vials of sculptra and then 2 vials of Lanluma. And after 1 vial of Lanluma, I didn't even tell you that I had done anything differently, but after 1 vial of Lanluma, I started getting comments under my videos saying, what have you done to your face? How did you feel in your face? So just after 1 vial of Lanluma, there was a visible difference. Now, one question I get quite frequently is, do I think that the 7 or 8 vials of sculptra sort of put down the groundwork and made the Lanluma work better? And I honestly don't think so. Because, as I said earlier, to build collagen or to produce collagen takes time. It takes weeks to even months. But I had these 7 or 8 vials of sculptra injected over a year and a half. So in a year and a half, something should have happened. And then after my last sculptra vial, I waited, I believe, 3 months to get the first Lanluma vial. So again, in those 3 months, something should have happened, and it really didn't, or barely did. So I don't think that the sculptra laid the groundwork. I think sculptra just did very little for me, and Lanluma did the trick. Now, both sculptra and Lanluma, as I mentioned earlier, are polylactic acid, PLLA. They are the exact same material. Not only do sculptra and Lanluma both contain polylactic acid, but they also both contain mannitol as well as carboxymethyl cellulose. So on paper, both sculptra and Lanluma look exactly the same. And there is a very well-known doctor here on YouTube. I guess somebody told him about my video in which I talked about Lanluma working for me and sculptra didn't. And this doctor said that I was full of crap and that I must be sponsored by Lanluma because it was impossible for me to get better results from Lanluma than sculptra, since they are the exact same thing. And again, I agree, they are the exact same thing. They are both made from polylactic acid. But in my Lanluma video, I actually show the 2 different vials. And it is very apparent when comparing the consistency of the sculptra powder to the Lanluma powder that there is a difference in particle size. So my assumption, and this is just my assumption, but my assumption is that this difference in particle size is why Lanluma ended up working for me when sculptra didn't. And interestingly, The Natural Injector, another creator here on YouTube, made a video last year comparing sculptra to Lanluma. And in that video, she talked about a study done in August of 23, which compared sculptra to Lanluma, and it showed what I experienced, that Lanluma gave better results than sculptra. And trust me, Lanluma has no idea I even exist. I wish they sponsored me, but they didn't. They have no idea I exist. Now, one thing I do need to mention is while both Lanluma and Sculptra are both polyalactic acid, a vial of Sculptra contains 150 milligrams of polyalactic acid, versus a vial of Lanluma, V, contains 210 milligrams of polyalactic acid, so a third more. And Dr. Guzman does say that one vial of Lanluma equals about 3 vials of Sculptra. Now, some of you might say, well, of course, 1 vial of Lanluma equals 3 vials of Sculptra, so of course I got better results with it. Maybe. So if 1 vial of Lanluma equals 3 vials of Sculptra, it would basically be like 6 vials of Sculptra. But after 6 vials of Sculptra, I hardly saw any difference, versus after 1 vial of Lanluma, I did see a difference. So I don't even think it's because there is more in a vial. Again, I really think for some reason the particle size was just different enough for my body to respond when it didn't to Sculptra. Another question I get quite frequently is, did I get any granulomas? And a granuloma, just in case you're not familiar, is a small localized area of inflammation that forms when the body's immune system attempts to isolate and contain something it perceives as harmful. And granulomas can happen when one has biostimulators or even filler injected. But according to Dr. Guzman, biostimulators only cause granulomas when not diluted well enough or for long enough. And any good provider should know to dilute their biostimulator well enough and for long enough. And by the way, if you are thinking of getting biostimulators, please don't just take what I say and run with it. Please, always, first of all, do your own research, find a good provider, and talk to your provider about any concerns you may be having. Something else that is brought up quite frequently, especially under my skincare videos, is people will often say, why are you hiding that you had biostimulators injected? Obviously, that is why your skin is looking healthy. Now, first of all, I'm not hiding that I had biostimulators injected. I have, again, 3 or 4 videos on my experience with biostimulators. Secondly, most of the time I forget about mentioning it. It's not because I'm trying to hide it, I just forget about mentioning it. And thirdly, I personally, while I think that biostimulators are great as far as restoring volume, I personally don't think they do much as far as improving quality of skin. I had, like I said, 7 or 8 vials of Sculptra, as well as 2 vials of Lanluma, injected mostly in the lower part of my face, because that is where I was sunken in. I had about 10% of it injected into the apple of my cheeks, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I almost forgot to mention that, had on my last visit when I saw Dr. Guzman, so I had 2 vials of Lanluma total in my face and a half a vial in my neck. My neck is an area I have neglected my whole life, and I hate to use the word bad, but I do feel my neck looks quite bad. And even after having biostimulators injected in my neck, I feel it looks exactly the same. There was 0 difference as far as quality of skin. Also, I have never injected biostimulators in my forehead, and I personally don't think there is a difference as far as quality of skin from my forehead to my cheeks. That's why I don't mention it. Like I said, I forget about it often. I'm definitely not trying to hide it because I have several videos on it, but I really don't think as far as quality of skin, biostimulators do much. I think they're really just for volume restoration, which is what I was after. Now, I just mentioned that I had 90% of the biostimulator injected in this area and about 10% in the apple of my cheeks. And the reason for that is not to make my cheekbones any bigger, they are plenty big, but in the hopes of lifting some of this right here. And quite a few of you have asked me, does this help with jowling? And unfortunately for me at least, it didn't. I don't per se have jowls. I have a strong German jaw, which I'm lucky, but I have what is known as perioral folds, which is the extra skin right here that is starting to just hang because gravity is taking over, loss of collagen, loss of bone mass, and so on. And of course, if I do this, it looks a lot better. It takes that away. So the hope was by injecting just a little bit of biostimulator into the apple of my cheeks, it would give me a bit of a lift. Unfortunately, it didn't. Now, that could be because we just didn't inject enough biostimulator in the apple of my cheek to give me more of a lift. But because I already have such pronounced cheekbones, I didn't want to take the risk of looking strange. But if you are thinking of trying this for jowling and you don't have such pronounced cheekbones, you might get away with putting a bit more there and getting more of a lift. For me, it didn't work. Now, lastly, a question I got quite frequently is about the cost for both Sculptra as well as Lanluma. Now, first of all, unfortunately, Lanluma at the time of making this video is not yet available in the United States. I hope it will soon, but at this point all we have here is Sculptra. So Lanluma, to my knowledge, is available in Asia as well as Europe. But as far as cost, it really depends on where you live. We lived in Paris, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world. But surprisingly, about a year and a half ago, the going rate for a vial of Sculptra in Paris was around 600 euros, which back then was about $650 to $700, depending on the exchange rate. And that is what I paid. I paid 600 euros per vial of Sculptra, and then Dr. Guzman ended up charging me the same amount per vial of Lanluma, even though, as I mentioned earlier, Lanluma does contain about a third more product. So technically it should be more expensive, but I think Dr. Guzman felt bad about me having spent so much money. So she charged me the same amount for Lanluma as she did for Sculptra. But like I said, it really depends on where you live. So it would be interesting if any of you have had Sculptra or Lanluma and you don't mind sharing where you live and what you paid, please let us know in the comments. So these are the most frequently asked questions I get under my Sculptra videos. Of course, if you have any more questions, please leave them down below. But as I mentioned earlier, so many of you wanted me to give you an update on my experience with these biostimulators. But before I do so, I want to say really briefly again that I truly believe in the importance of learning to love and accept ourselves, flaws and all. I try not to be someone who looks in the mirror just to nitpick every imperfection I can find. I did that for way too long when I was anorexic. It was exhausting, very damaging, and a losing battle. So as I've gotten older, I have tried to find a balance. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, I want to look my best, and I want to be attractive for myself and my partner. So if there is something I can do that doesn't take over my life, is not too invasive or damaging to myself, I might do it. But I also want to be able to look in the mirror, love what I see, even if things are going south. But as I mentioned, the reason I got biostimulators in the first place is because when I looked in the mirror, I realized I wasn't looking very healthy. I had lost a lot of facial volume, and I was hoping to restore that. And I definitely feel, especially once Dr. Guzman started using Lanluma, I definitely feel that I restored all the facial volume I had lost. So to answer a question I get very frequently, yes, I'm very happy with the results, and I would definitely do it again. In hindsight, I would jump straight to Lanluma, but hindsight is 2020. And that being said, just because Sculptra didn't do much for me, if getting biostimulators is something you are thinking about, it doesn't mean that Sculptra doesn't work for you. There are many men and women it works just fine for. It just didn't do much for me. Now, it is suggested, even with biostimulators, to get regular maintenance sessions. Because even though biostimulators aren't filler and the body doesn't metabolize it, but instead, again, these biostimulators stimulate the body's natural collagen production process. Unfortunately, collagen is something we continue to lose as we age. Now, it is said that the results from Sculptra last for up to 2 years, and the results from Lanluma between 2 and 5 years. But regardless, with either one, it is suggested to have regular maintenance sessions about every 12 months or so. My last Lanluma session was about 14 months ago. So right about now would be a great time to get a maintenance session. However, as I said earlier, unfortunately at the time of making this video, Lanluma is not available in the United States, and currently I live in California. I have played around with the thought to give Sculptra another try, but I think I would be really mad if I spent all that money because again, well, Sculptra wasn't cheap in Paris. I know it is even more expensive here in California, so I think I would be really mad if I spent all that money just to not see results again. So most likely I will wait until I either visit Europe or we live in Europe again. But ideally, since it has been 14 months, right now would be a good time to do a maintenance session. Now, to answer another question I got quite frequently, I do feel that my results over the last 14 months have kept up nicely. However, the last 6 months since living here in California have been very stressful. And when I'm under stress, I lose weight. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just what my body does. And even if I just lose a couple of pounds, it shows on my face. So while I feel that the results from Lanluma have kept up nicely, I have lost a bit of volume in my face, which is probably because I've lost a bit of weight. So I hope this answered all of your questions. Yes, I'm happy with the results. I would definitely do it again. In hindsight, I would go straight to Lanluma. And if I could, I would do a maintenance session right now. I might try Sculptra again. I'm not sure. If I do, of course, I will take you with me. But again, I might just wait until I'm back in Europe and do another session of Lanluma. So I hope this answered all of your questions. Of course, if you have any more or any comments, please leave them down below. I would love to know, have you had biostimulators, Sculptra or Lanluma, or anything else you want to share? Please share down below. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, bye.